I've set up the most precarious situation for this phone to sit on, and I'm worried it will all come crashing down. Hi guys, so I wanted to make a video about books because I had a really good reading year in 2020. Amongst the crazy year it was, I read a lot. For me, I made a goal of 15 books a year, which for some will sound like a lot and some will sound like nothing. But for me, it's a lot. So I reached actually 11 books out of 15. So I set again, my goal for 2021 is 15. I'm gonna try to do it, hopefully even more. But 2020, I read that's a lot for me. So I thought that I would make a video about, originally I thought about my favorite books of 2020, but then in the end, I didn't read 50 books, I read 11. So I will share with you all 11, and I kind of categorize them in my top favorites, and then kind of just the others. There wasn't really anything except for 2 that I really didn't like. So most of these, I liked all of them. But I read some really, really nice stuff in 2020. So I hope that you've either read them also and we can talk about it, or you can read them now after watching this video. I also made a small little note pad for myself because I feel like I'm going to already admit that I'm very bad at describing books. I love watching book reviews on YouTube. And Sunbeam's Jess she's amazing, and she has such, everything's just on point, the way that she describes the books that she reads. So I really strive to do that, but I'm nowhere near. So the first book that I put, okay, I have a top 5 favorites, and then we have the rest of them. So the first one, and they're not in any particular order, is Year of the Monkey by Patti Smith. This book was amazing. I love Patti Smith. I love everything about her. She's the best Instagram account on Instagram by far. So you need to follow her if you don't follow her. She's amazing. I love her. I love her music. I love her writing. I will pretty much love anything she writes. But Year of the Monkey is her newest book, and it was particularly a knockout. It was really, really great. I wrote, it's dreamlike, it's very stream of consciousness, which is very much the way she writes. It sweeps you into her world, you feel like you're flying and dreaming with her. There's something about this book, I already want to reread it 5 times, but it has something very, I feel like you're just floating through her thoughts and through her experiences. And it is kind of about her dreams and reality, and you don't always know when she's dreaming, when it's a dream and when it's real. But you just kind of fly on that journey with her, and I think it was very moving, very inspiring. I wrote that it makes you want to be a writer. This book really made me want to write and to kind of log my experiences of living like she does. I wrote everything I like in a book, and it has this sense of time, or time kind of disappearing. It was just beautiful. The second book on my list is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This book is also, it's my first Toni Morrison book I've ever read, and for sure I need to make my way through her whole collection. She's just amazing. The prose is so beautiful, and it's a story. Okay, I'm not really describing what the books are about, but some of these books I read really early in the year, last year in 2020, so it's hard for me to bring back and describe to you the ins and outs of the plot. But in The Bluest Eye, we basically follow a young girl, a young black girl, and she has this dream of having blue eyes. And, well, I will never begin to describe this book well enough. I will link it below, but there's an interview with Toni Morrison talking about this talking about this book, and also the introduction she writes. It's just so interesting. I'm not even going to begin to try to explain it. I wrote, like, it's very heartbreaking. The story is very heartbreaking. There is really vivid imagery. It's very poetic, but it hits you very hard. It's talking about race, racial identity, also beauty and what that means, and your kind of self-vision, how you view yourself. I wrote trigger warning because there's domestic violence in this book, so there's some content that might trigger you, so that's just for you to decide if you want to read that, but I'm doing such a bad job at explaining it. Such a beautiful book, and it's hard and it hits you really hard, but I think it's a very, very important read. Yeah, just read it. My third book is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. So Jess, or Jessie from Sunbeam's Jess, she described it as a quiet little book, which is spot on. It's about this island in Japan where things start to be forgotten. Objects, animals, different things start to kind of disappear from the island and disappear from people's memories. So they can even encounter the thing, but they just don't know what it is or how it makes them feel, or it doesn't bring any kind of emotion or sensation to them when those things have been disappeared from the island. And there are some people on the island who do remember, that don't lose their memory, and so that's where we have the memory police coming in, kind of capturing those people and taking them away from society. So we follow one character who does forget things, so she's narrating and she's sort of like unreliable because she's forgetting things as the book goes on, and I don't think it's giving away too much, but it sort of like goes into a like an Anne Frank kind of situation where she takes in someone who does remember everything and she wants to protect them from the memory police. So I wrote, like, it's simple language, but it's very impactful. It's thought-provoking. The imagery, for me, I really enjoy imagery. I love poetry also for that reason. So this book is very, it's big on images, and it's kind of slow and simple, but those images like still stick with me after, and I read it like months and months ago, and I still can pull specific images from the book into my brain. So it's really gorgeous. It talks about the relationship to objects and to memory, and also it's sort of about love. It's not a love story, but it does kind of speak about love, and it is a love story in a certain sense. And like, what is love? What does love mean when you forget things, and like how far can that go? And if everything that you have a relationship to disappears, so what does it leave you with? So I really, really loved this book. I would 100% read it again. I would recommend it. I'm sure it's not everyone's cup of tea. Also, Yoko Ogawa, you'll see later in the list that I started reading through more of her writing after this book. The next book in my favorites category is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi. I hope I'm saying his name right. I feel like I've heard his name said like 15 different ways, so I don't know. So Between the World and Me, it's autobiographical kind of essay written to his son about his life, about being Black in America, about that struggle, about finding his identity and sort of just sharing with his son sort of all the things that he's going to encounter in the world and the things that he's going to face and the things that he's already facing. So I wrote that it's very, very powerful. At times it's upsetting because of the nature of the content. It's about race, it's about blackness in America, it's about identity, and also about belonging, but also disassociation, and also like a sense of rage that comes from that. 100% a must read. I wrote it down. And it's also a really good blend of like factual information about the situation of race in America specifically, but also mixing it with like a very personal story, which makes it very readable also. And yeah, it's really beautiful and hard, but you must read it for sure. The last book in the favorites category is After Dark by Haruki Murakami. I was talking about this book with my boyfriend's sister. He's here. She said that she recently read this book and that she found it really interesting, and she was describing it to me, and I thought that I would really like it. And I've read Murakami before and really like his writing. So this book is also very short. It's big on the imagery. I wrote that it's all about atmosphere. Very, very strong imagery. It's dreamlike. It's very surreal. It's very Murakami if you like his writing. And basically takes place, I think, in like one night or over a few nights. It doesn't span that long time. I think it might actually only span like 24 hours in Tokyo in the night, mostly. And kind of in this love hotel. So it has like these mysterious vibes. Like the name After Dark is very fitting. Yeah, it just is really very strong in the atmosphere, and the characters are quite, it's a short book, so you don't get like, we don't get hundreds of pages about them, but they're very interesting. I would also say if you didn't read Murakami before, this might be a nice one to start with. Maybe. I really liked it. Now we get into the other books that I read this year that were not my top favorites, but they were still great. And then I will speak about two specific books in the end that I didn't love so much. So these are the other ones. This is False Papers by Aciman. He wrote Call Me By Your Name, which I have here on the shelf, and I have not read it yet. I also haven't seen the movie. So this is a book of essays about exile and memory. I love books of essays in general. And I put this in like other good books category and not my favorites, just because there were some essays that I just didn't enjoy so much, or that were about a particular person or subject that I just didn't get along with as much as some other essays that I thought were amazing. There's one in particular called In Search of Blue, which is gorgeous, and I will reread that essay for sure many times. But his writing is really beautiful. He's basically talking about remembering things, and a lot of it takes place in Alexandria, which is where he was born and grew up in Egypt. And he's kind of talking about that he goes back to Alexandria, and he almost prefers to remember it than to actually be there. So that's a whole theme that kind of goes across this book. Living something and revisiting something versus just remembering it, and how a certain thing lives in your memory versus how it is in reality. And how at times it can be better to leave things as they are in your memory than to go back and try to relive them again. Yeah, so It was really beautiful, very interesting. There are some amazing essays there, and then there are some that I just connected to less. The next book is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. I think this is the first book that I read in 2020. I think it was when we first went into lockdown towards the beginning of the year, around March. And I was in like a reading rut. I couldn't read anything. I wasn't reading that much. And so I picked up this book, which is by the same author that wrote Little Fires Everywhere, because we had just finished watching the series. And I didn't want to read that one because I had just watched a series, but I was interested in what else she wrote, so I picked up this one. And it was that kind of book that you like cannot put down. You are sure that you shouldn't even go to sleep because you want to keep reading it. So it has that thing that really like charged me and like put me back into a reading wave, which was great and which was exactly what I needed. However, I think I wanted to love it more. I got lost a little bit in the middle. The characters specifically, it's like a family drama, or kind of like a small town, secrets, gossip kind of vibe. There's a disappearance, like really at the beginning of the book. So there's a sense of mystery also, and it's like following each character in the family. Particularly the parents are incredibly unlikable characters. I hated both of them, and the middle section dives into their kind of narrative, and I didn't care to read about them because they were just really unlikable. So that was hard, but then the last whole third of the book is really, really gorgeous, very beautiful, very captivating. And like I was flipping the pages and eating the book. So in a way it was like a great, great book, and I really recommend it, especially if you want to just read something that's gonna transport you to somewhere else. Then I would recommend it for sure. It just wasn't in like my favorites, but the writing is really effective. Okay, I'm gonna try to go a little bit faster. So the last few books, the first one is Agua, Viva by Clarice Lispector. She's a Brazilian author, and I've seen her name and her kind of, she always has like very beautiful covers of her books that I see in like bookstore windows, and she always has like collections of stories that are quite thick. And I just kept seeing her name popping up, and I just didn't know where to start with her. And then I bought this little book. Actually, I have it. Most of these books I'm reading on my Kindle, which I didn't mention, but this one I actually bought from a bookstore. It's very small. It's 88 pages. Okay, so what I wrote about this book is it's not read to be understood at all. It's sort of also a very, very stream of consciousness format. So it's really difficult to understand sometimes what she's trying to say, but I took it as like that kind of book that's like you just highlight or underline parts that really speak to you, whether it's like prose that's really strong or an image that's really amazing. And so I just I found myself underlining a lot of things, but not like taking in the book as a whole. I think it kind of washes over you and you're sort of left with whatever you can grasp from it. So it was sort of nice that I didn't really need to use my brain to keep up with a story. It was kind of reading through it and just highlighting bits that popped out to me. So it's very visual, it's very poetic, it gave me a lot of inspiration, and I think she has a really intriguing literary voice, and I would like to read other things by her. So that was, that was sort of a strange book, but interesting. So next I have two books by Yoko Ogawa, who wrote The Memory Police that I spoke about earlier. So the first one is The Diving Pool, which is a book of 3 novellas. The Diving Pool being the name of one of them. I think the other one is called Pregnancy Diary or something, and the other one is The Dormitory, I think. So you get all of her amazing atmosphere and imagery that you get in the Memory Police. It's just a bit darker. It's a bit more disturbing. The atmosphere is really strong. The imagery is really strong, but it is quite dark and disturbing, but enjoyable. I did really enjoy it. There are moments from each of those stories that I still remember after reading them. So very short. If you like short stories or novellas, you might like this one. Then we get to her next book that I read, which is called Hotel Iris, which has that like disturbing element to it, but I found it not enjoyable to read as it went on. Eventually, it got really, really hard for me to read. It's about a girl that works in a hotel, Hotel Iris, in this kind of coastal town in Japan. Her mom is kind of crazy. It's a family business, so she works there, and there's a situation with a man and a prostitute in one of the rooms. This is how the book starts. And then she kind of keeps running into him, and they sort of develop a relationship. At first I was really enjoying and I was in it, and then it just started to get really hard for me. It's upsetting. I definitely would say there's a trigger warning on this book. There's like a lot of pretty rough sexual imagery, so whether that like upsets you or not, you should take that under consideration. There's like BDSM vibes also. So it's a really like, it really hit me and made me feel like I wanted to put the book down, which like definitely she's an amazing writer. Just like the content was hard for me towards the end to keep reading. I was like, oh my god, like when is it gonna end? And I do remember like the ending being quite strong and beautiful, just difficult content. I would say that it was not my favorite book I read last year. And then we get to the last one, which is a book of poetry that I also have in print. This is Crush by Richard Siken. This is also very short because it's a book of poems. It's 62 pages. So there are many passages I highlighted because I have a complicated feeling about this book. At the beginning, I wrote, it was an eye roll. I was reading it and I was just, I love poetry, but there are some things about poetry that people really have problems with, and like they roll their eyes at poetry, and this was a particular collection that I was feeling like that. Like I just thought it was dark for being dark, it was depressing to be depressing, it was trying to be provocative just for the sake of being provocative, and I just found it really hard at the beginning to fully appreciate it, to be honest. But I felt like it grew on me. I wrote that there are some very, very strong poems in here that are very thought-provoking. It's about sexual identity, it's about love. Someone wrote, like online, it's confessional, it's savage, and it's like violent eroticism. Definitely, there's like I put a huge trigger warning on this in terms of like sexual violence, if that's something that you can't handle, so don't pick this one up because it's really in your face. I came to enjoy, and there are some poems in here that I definitely have already reread a few times and have shared with others. So yeah, I feel complicated about this. It's strong. I can appreciate him and his vulnerability also in this collection, but there are parts, especially in the beginning, where I thought, this is the kind of poetry I don't like. And that's everything I read in 2020, and I'm gonna put my Goodreads account down below so you can follow what I'm currently reading or what I've read. Again, I set myself a challenge for 15 books, so you can sign up also and set yourself a challenge if you want to read this year, even if it's 3 books. That's amazing. And thank you for watching, and if you've read any of these, please give me your thoughts down below. And I hope that you pick up some of these and give them a try. Especially like the first 5, I would say add those to your bookshelf. And hope you're doing well, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.